Every small business I have ever worked with has done some version of this, probably your business too. Somebody is excellent at their job, so you give them a team. It feels like the obvious move, and it can be. They know the work, they know the standards, they know the business. But what you don't realize until later, and sometimes much later, is that knowing how to do the job and knowing how to lead people who do the job are completely different skills. And you just handed someone a team without teaching them a single thing about that second one. I'm not suggesting that promoting a high performer isn't the move. It absolutely is. But doing so without developing leadership skills is the gap. Because here's what happens. They take everything that made them effective as an individual contributor, things like their work habits, their standards, their way of solving problems, and then they apply those to their team. They manage the way they work. They hold people to the standards that worked for them personally. They solve problems by doing the work themselves because that's what they know how to do. And at first, this usually looks fine. The team is producing, the manager is involved, things are moving. What is actually happening is that the manager has become a high-functioning individual contributor with a team attached. They're not developing the people below them. They are not building the team's capacity to operate without them. And they have no idea how to handle the things that don't look like their own work. Things like performance issues, interpersonal conflict, underperformance, feedback conversations that go sideways. So those things either escalate back to another leader, or usually what I see is that they don't get handled at all. Sending someone to a 2-day conference is not development. Running a team building workshop, it's not development. Giving someone a book is, oh my goodness, not development. These are activities. They have a place. They are not a substitute for building actual capability. A coaching relationship that focuses entirely on the manager's feelings about their role without connecting to specific behavioral change, it's not development. Development is this: identifying the specific leadership behaviors your business requires, assessing where each manager actually is against those behaviors, and building a deliberate practice that closes the gap in real situations with real feedback. It's not a one-time event. It's not an offsite. It's a system. And there are 6 specific things that actually constitute leadership capability. Things your managers need to know how to do, not just be told. Number 3 is the most costly. Let's break them down. The first thing is they need to know how to give feedback that lands. Not that they should give feedback. Every manager knows they should, but how to do it, what to say, how to frame it so the person hears it rather than deflects it. How to separate behavior from character in the delivery. How to be direct without being punishing. Most first-time managers avoid feedback conversations because they don't know how to have them without it going wrong, so they delay, and then the problem compounds. By the time they address it, it's a bigger conversation than it had to be. It goes badly, and they avoid it even more the next time. Number 2 is to run a one-on-one that is actually useful. Most managers run one-on-ones that are status updates. The employee tells them what they're working on, the manager nods, 15 minutes, and we are done. A useful one-on-one surfaces what is actually going on for the employee. What's in their way? Where are they stuck? What do they need to develop? It creates the data the people leader needs to actually lead. Without it, the manager is flying blind, relying on what they observe directly, which in most environments is a fraction of what's actually happening. Now let's talk about the one that businesses hardly ever train and feel the most. Before I share that one, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that button so you never miss an episode that could change the people operations side of your business for the better. Number 3 is to manage underperformance before it becomes a crisis. This is the critical one. This is the skill first-time managers are least equipped for, and it is the one with the highest cost to the business when it's missing. What does a manager do when someone isn't delivering? When do you coach versus when do you escalate? When do you put someone on a formal plan? When is the conversation with human resources? What does documentation look like? What triggers a separation decision? Managers who don't know how to answer these questions do one of 2 things. They avoid the conversation entirely, which means the underperformance runs unchecked and just perpetuates, and the high performers on the team start looking for exits. Or they overcorrect and they handle it so poorly that it becomes an employee relations problem. Here's why this one matters most for growth specifically. A business scales on the performance of its people, period. When underperformance goes unmanaged, the business is not operating at its actual capacity. It's operating at the capacity of its most accommodating manager. That ceiling compounds at every stage. Untrained managers at 25 smaller become a leadership crisis at 50 and more. Number 4 is to understand what authority they actually hold. Ambiguity around authority creates one of the most toxic dynamics in a growing company. Managers who are afraid to make decisions because they've learned that making a call without the founder's input sometimes gets reversed. I did a whole episode on this previously. This was the previous episode, so we'll make sure that is linked for you. But basically, your managers need to know explicitly what decisions are theirs to make, what requires consultation, and what requires approval. If they don't know, they will default to asking every time. And you may think it's a delegation problem when actually it's an authority design failure. Number 5 is to develop people. A manager who develops their people makes the whole organization stronger over time. A manager who doesn't creates a ceiling at their own capability level. Most managers at this stage have never been taught what developing a person actually means. They confuse it with giving assignments. They don't know how to identify a growth gap in someone else or to design a deliberate practice around it and coach through that progression. This is a teachable skill. Most small businesses just never teach it. And then finally, number 6, operate consistently across the team. One manager holds deadlines tightly, another extends them to avoid conflict. One addresses behavior directly, another lets things go to keep the peace. One team knows exactly what good looks like, another is just guessing. Your employees experience your business through their leader. If managers are operating on different standards, your employees are experiencing different companies inside of your company. They know it. They compare notes. The inconsistency becomes a retention problem, a trust problem, and eventually what looks like a culture problem, which is really just an accountability problem that was never designed out. So the cost of not teaching these things is not a single event. It is a compounding pattern. Underdeveloped leaders create undertrained teams. Undertrained teams have inconsistent performance. And inconsistent performance creates accountability gaps. And then accountability gaps mean your high performers are carrying load for people who aren't being managed. And high performers will leave. At 40 employees, this produces a team that works but doesn't really scale. At 75, it produces a founder bottleneck because the managers never developed the capacity to hold the business without the founder in the room. And at 100 employees, it produces a leadership layer that cannot execute strategy because no one built the muscle for it. It's not bad luck. This is predictable. And it starts the day you promote someone without developing their leadership skills. Here's the bottom line on this. You cannot hold managers accountable for leadership behaviors you never taught them. If a manager is consistently avoiding feedback conversations, the first question is not why won't they do it? It's did anyone ever show them how? If you're growing a small business, I would love to hear from you. Leave me a comment and let me know if you are doing any type of leadership development, and if you are, what differences you've seen in your business. If you are doing leadership development and you're not seeing any results, I would look at 2 things. One, it could be the type of leadership development you're doing. Maybe that's just not as impactful as you need it to be. Or it could be an accountability problem, which I've done an entire video on. That's probably the one you should watch next. Thanks so much for being here. See you next time.